It's all downhill from here, folks. I peaked. Wait, we gotta keep the title. So, welcome to MagCon, the convention to plan MagFest, the festival, which is different from the convention, MagCon. So this weekend is to learn about new policies, get training on special topics, scope out the space that you're using, and get much needed face time. So without further ado, let's get started. So basic overview of the controls for this weekend. Make sure I have this here. I can't even see my damn slides. Parking. If you are not staying the night, talk to Ashley. She'll get you set up with a parking pass. If you are staying the night, there should be parking built into your room key. It may not be working right now, but we're working on it. If you have a PEX card. Oh, okay. And if we're out of parking vouchers, use a PEX card. Name tags are in the back corner there. If you haven't already gotten one, please grab one. Put your name, department, and pronouns on there. We have snacks across the hall, National Harbor 6. You probably already seen them. And that will also be the party area tonight. We do not have the suite this weekend, unfortunately. But we will be having pizza in here right after the Div Head updates. So now that we're familiar with the controls of the event, it's time to choose what we're going to do here. So, the presentation. All right, there we go. First up, we got Elizabeth from TakeThis, who will be here to talk about mental health. I know I sound like a broken record when I'm talking about this mental health stuff, but running these events can take a lot out of you, and you can forget about your personal health when you're putting it on. So it's really important to learn how to take care of yourself when you're doing these, and don't let the event run your life. The TakeThis people also run the AFK Lounge at MagFest, which is like a mental health lounge, mental health first aid to go to chill out if it's too much. Beyond that, we also got presentations from where's Matt Beal, our Lord of Logistics. So we're doing some demonstrations on how to move shit effectively. Where are Tim and Tom? Are they here? Not yet. Tim McNeil and Tom Heyer went to Russia and did some batshit crazy stuff that is the most exciting story I've heard all year. So you'll be hearing from them. We also have the Mag Labs crew. Where's the research team? We got Adam, Chris, Donnelly. Is Jared around? Jared, they'll be talking about Mag Labs activities for next year. And Steph will be talking about the finances and how important they are and why you got to turn your goddamn tally on time. Other than that, there's going to be some other breakouts. Check out the schedule, and also actually put together a portal page that has all the info about MagCon. You can use the link up there for that. Turn this show up. So a couple changes for the format of this MagCon versus typical MagCons. I did not put my slides on here. Come around the front here. Oh God. So last year we introduced the more hardcore training presentation with the Uplift people who talks about sexual assault intervention and awareness. It was great. It was a great lesson that I learned a lot from, and a lot of people were really engaged with it. But it was happened like midday. After everyone kind of broke off and was looking at their space, so it's tough to make anything at MagFest mandatory, frankly. So to make sure to highlight this most important specialized training, we decided to make it the first thing. So we flip-flopped the event update presentations and the specialized training. So again, Elizabeth will be up first, and then we'll go through the usual event update stuff after that. We no longer have to wait 12 hours for food. It's going to come much earlier. Ashley was very good about hearing feedback on that. Thank you. And we just, in general, don't have as many things so that we can give people a chance to talk to each other. And because this is one of the few times a year that people can actually see each other and talk and plan the event. And because we have less things, that's less of me talking, which is very boring. So, without further ado, I'd like to welcome Elizabeth from TakeThis.
How are you guys doing tonight? Everyone's good? You're way. Congratulations. It's kind of better than I am. Okay, if I don't want to make this, what do? Can someone help me? How do I make this part go away? This part. Oh. Oh, that's beautiful. Okay. It's just my screen. I thought it was mirroring. All right. Hey, everyone. I'm Elizabeth. I am a licensed professional counselor, and I work with the TakeThis organization. I'm the manager of the AFK room. How many people in here are veteran MagFest people? Like almost everyone. Did anyone see the AFK room last year? Is anyone familiar with that? Yeah, It's right next to it, or at least it was last year, which was really lovely. Yeah, okay, so I'm going to talk about kind of what that does. What TakeThis does is we do mental health advocacy and education in the gaming community, which has been super interesting. I've been with them since 2012, and I've really seen it grow and the impact that it's had at conventions. I think it's like a really big need, actually, having some education awareness around mental health issues in this community. So, why is this important? Because 1 in 2 people, 50% of Americans, will struggle with a mental health issue at some point in their life. And that's according to the CDC. 1 in 5 people will experience a mental health issue, an acute mental health issue within a given year. So this is really prevalent. This is everywhere. And I think especially within the gaming community, there are some things inherent about gaming that can make people be at risk, that sometimes it can be a little bit isolating, that some things about gaming can be inherently addictive, and so it's something to kind of just keep in mind. You guys are representatives of MagFest, so you guys are sort of the first line in defense in helping attendees who might be struggling with any mental health issues. And so what we're kind of going to be talking about in this presentation is how to recognize when somebody might be experiencing some emotional distress and how to respond appropriately to that. And then also we're going to talk a little bit about you guys and how you guys can all take care of yourselves, because MagFest can certainly take a lot out of you. But MagFest is awesome. Why is fun so stressful? And it's true, it's really fun, right? But cons are just such stimulating environments, right? You have like loud music, and you have crowds, and you have lights and colors, and people in crazy costumes and everything, and it's all fun and it's all amazing, but it's also like sensory overload. You're not running on maybe as much sleep as you usually get. You're maybe not being as healthy as you usually are. It's just an exciting environment, right? But sometimes when we're really excited and overstimulated, we can also have that subsequent crash later on. There's kind of a sense of immediacy for attendees where it's like, oh my gosh, I want to see everything that MagFest has to offer. I want to be everywhere all at once. And there isn't really enough time to do and see all of the things that you want to do. And that can create some stress. That can create some anxiety. There's a sense of competition. There's a sense of, just we're gamers, we like to compete, and that can kind of, and here the bar might be a little bit higher than with your buddies in the living room. That can get people on edge a little bit. And then just sort of the like everything is awesome syndrome or fear of missing out, just wanting to cram everything in all at the same time. Like I was saying, it gets really, really stressful. So people who maybe aren't even, or who don't ordinarily struggle with emotional issues or any kind of anxiety, can be overwhelming even for them. So if you are somebody who struggles with maybe social anxiety or depression or anything like that, all of these things can really get amplified during MagFest. So we're going to talk a little bit about how to recognize distress and how to maybe tell when somebody looks like they might be in some need of some help. And sometimes it's a little bit more subtle than others. Sometimes it's very obvious that somebody is having an issue, and sometimes it's a little less obvious, and we have to learn to kind of recognize the signs. If someone is in the midst of a panic attack, some of the things that we might expect to see are their body language, right? They're really tense. Maybe they're talking a lot. They're talking rapidly. They're talking loudly. Maybe they seem kind of irritable or angry, or they're kind of like snapping at people. Maybe their breathing is a little off. Maybe they're like bright red in the face. So those might be some of the more like overt, obvious signs of distress. But sometimes you'll just have someone who doesn't want to make eye contact, who's just sitting really still, who is sort of internally having that freak out, and it's also kind of important to look out for that. Basically what you're looking for is just something that seems out of the ordinary. If there's somebody who looks like they are just not maybe having a good time, they're not flowing with the rest of the group. And it's better to sort of be safe than sorry, because again, you guys are representatives of the entire con. So an example would be our clinical director, Dr. B, saw somebody who had like his head down, he had his hands kind of covering up his head, he's like squatting on the floor, and went up to him and was just like, hey, like, you doing all right? And the guy was like, oh yeah, I'm totally fine, I'm good. I'm just like taking a breather for a second. And what's the harm in asking if someone is doing all right? But for every person who's totally fine in that situation, there could be people who are really struggling and need someone to just come up and be like, hey, are you okay? What can I do for you? So yay, we know how to recognize distress a little bit. What do we do with that information? How do we respond to that in an appropriate way? Extra virgin olive oil. This is how we can remember it. So empathize, validate, and offer options. The good thing about like trying to assist with a mental health issue is that you don't have to be a mental health professional. We're not asking you guys to be psychologists, right, and like try to treat and fix whatever's helping. But there are some things that you can do just by being a good human that are going to be really helpful in those situations. So I'm kind of going to go over like some of the techniques that we use as clinicians to try to help people and try to de-escalate situations. And these are all sort of just genuinely just trying to be like a helpful person, and that's how we're going to get the best results. It's how we're going to get the best outcomes for our attendees and get them back so that they can go back to having fun. So empathy. All right, again, basic human sort of quality here, but empathy is, it's more than just sort of seeing somebody is in distress and feeling bad for them. It's kind of trying to put yourself in their place and experience what they are experiencing. So an example might be something that I work with a lot of teenagers. Something I see with teenagers is they might get really upset because their mom is telling them to stop playing RDR2. And they get all excited and they get all tantrumy and they kind of start freaking out. And an empathetic response to that situation to try to help that kid de-escalate, it's not the same as approving or saying that it's okay that they freaked out and that they tantrum, that they shouldn't go to bed. But an empathetic response might be something like, okay, you're upset right now. I can understand why it would be frustrating. You were playing that game, you're really super into it, and you weren't ready to stop playing it. And with that response, I'm basically opening the door for understanding. I'm making a connection. And that's kind of what we're encouraging you guys to do, is like you only have a brief interaction with somebody, but in that moment, you want to try to connect with them. That's how you're going to help somebody who's struggling emotionally, is by making that connection. So by demonstrating that you understand what they're going through and you kind of put yourself in their shoes, then that person is going to kind of automatically drop their guard a little bit. They're going to feel less threatened in that situation. So if someone is upset and they're freaking out, let's say you have an attendee, something I've seen before is like somebody would come in and say like, everyone was staring at me and I felt like I was just like on a spotlight. To say like, to think about a time where maybe you felt like everyone was staring at you and what that was like in that kind of panic, even if it's not necessarily true, maybe nobody was staring at this person, but reflecting within yourself about what that experience would be like and trying to understand where that person is. So in a similar vein, validating. So if someone is saying, I feel like everyone is staring at me right now, an invalidating response would be like, no one is looking at you. What are you talking about? That's ridiculous. No one cares. That's invalidating, right? So the validating empathetic response would be like, you feel like people are staring at you, and that's a really scary feeling, to feel like people are all staring at you, and I can see why that might incite some panic in you. You don't want to argue. You don't want to, you want to try to find the truth in what they're saying. It's not important whether they're right or wrong in that moment. The important part is trying to understand them and trying to, again, connect with them. So avoid debates, because sometimes it is tempting to engage in a debate with somebody about something. You want to get away from that. That's not really what we're doing here. So I have some kind of like common techniques that we use. So instead of using the word but, like you really wanted to go to this concert, but you're having a lot of anxiety about it, try something like, you really want to go to this concert and you're experiencing some anxiety right now. You see how that's a little softer when it's like it's acknowledging, it's not dismissing the anxiety, it's incorporating it into part of what that person is experiencing. To say, like, everyone has bad days. It's really dismissive, right? Like, oh, you're just having a bad moment. Well, everyone has bad days. So what? Instead, making a comment kind of like, that's a lot to process. That's a lot that you're going through right now. Like saying why, asking why questions. That's something that we really try to get away from when we're working with people, because it's an accusation, right? Like, well, why don't you just go to the concert? What's the problem? Why can't you just pick yourself up and go? So something I like to replace that with is using the statement, I wonder. It's really a good statement, I wonder. I use it all the time with people. Saying, instead of like, well, why don't you just go? Saying like, I wonder what would happen if you were to go. I wonder what would happen if you didn't go. How would you feel if you weren't able to go to that concert? What do you think would happen? Like what, if you were at this concert, what are you nervous about happening in that situation? You're opening the door. You're getting them to kind of talk about it. You're getting them to kind of express themselves about how they're feeling. Because then when they do that, when they feel like, okay, this person is understanding me, then they might be able to actually provide some rationale that we can challenge gently. Like, okay, you're afraid of going to this concert because there are going to be a lot of people pushing and shoving. What are some options that we can talk about? Which is our next part, offering options. So I think probably the most important option, the first thing that I usually ask someone when they're experiencing emotional distress at a con is, who are you here with? Where are your friends? Where are your parents? If you're here alone, who can we call to get you connected with somebody? Reach out to those people and bring them back into the picture if this person isn't with them. That's really important because that's their natural support network. Like, we can offer what we can offer, but they need their people, right? Use your authority. So basically, like, if somebody is in a state of emotional distress and they are being really belligerent, they're being aggressive, they're being unsafe, that's when that kind of goes beyond the scope of what we're talking about here. That's when you follow your policies for dealing with people who are maybe having some out of control behavior. That's when you call security, and you can use your authority to keep people in line before it escalates to that point. So, for example, like, someone is running up and down, just say, you need to walk, not run. It's not aggressive, you're not being hostile, you're not making a threat, but you're being really assertive with that. And everyone who's at MagFest, for the most part, wants to have a good time. They want to have fun. They're not trying to cause trouble, and they'll listen to you guys. So don't be afraid to use your voice as a staff member, as you're wearing your shirt, to remind people that they still need to behave appropriately. They still need to keep themselves together, to stop, like, it's a proactive measure to stop that from getting more out of control. But if it does get out of control, that's when you pull the alarm. That's when you reach out to security. That's when you guys follow your protocols for those kind of situations. Similarly, if someone is acting in a way that seems harmful to themselves, that's when you kind of follow those policies that you guys have in place for responding to that situation. The broken record technique. So when you're offering somebody options, we get some kind of common roadblocks here. You might tell someone, I don't want to do that. I don't want to listen. I'm not going to call my people. I'm not going to try to get any help in this situation. The broken record technique is basically repeating yourself over and over and over again in a calm and kind way. But to say, okay, you're feeling upset, you're feeling frustrated right now. Here's what I can offer you. We can call someone that you're here with. Maybe you can go and step out for a second, and just kind of like giving those options, but repeating yourself over and over again. Because eventually, the important thing in that situation is not to escalate with them, right? Like, if you start getting upset or you start engaging or you start matching their tone, then they're going to escalate even more. But if you stay neutral and you stay calm and you continue presenting the same thing over and over again and being consistent like that, then you're going to get a better outcome in that situation. And the last and probably most important option for somebody who's experiencing non-threatening, non-harmful emotional distress is to encourage them to take a break, right? And for that, we have the AFK room, which is the room that I manage. So what is the AFK room? Some of you guys were familiar with it. Basically, the AFK room is, like, we call it by design the most boring room in the convention. It's quiet, it is low stimulation, we turn the lights down, we have coloring books on the table, things like that. And it's really just a place for people who are overstimulated, people who are stressed out. They can come and just sit for a while, for as long as they need to, until they kind of feel chill again and they're ready to go back out and start having fun again. We have the room staffed by licensed clinicians. There's a licensed clinician on every single shift, sometimes two, and they are there to answer any questions about mental health issues. We help people find resources. We help people figure out how to find a therapist. We try to kind of just be the face of therapy. Like what a lot of people, there's a lot of stigma about therapy and about therapists. A lot of people have had bad experiences with therapists. So just by kind of being like a friendly face and trying to answer questions and showing them, like most of the clinicians who volunteer in the AFK room are gamers too. So there's sort of that automatic connection. And I think when people realize we're like humans and we're not gonna like sit there and like prod at your brain, people feel a little bit more comfortable and are more inclined to go get help for themselves if they need it. And it's also a place to receive emotional first aid. So once in a while we do get somebody who's in the midst of a panic attack, and a staff member will bring them up to the room and we'll kind of sit with them and try to process what's going on and get them, de-escalated. Here's what the AFK room is not. So please, as staff members, if you guys could help us out with maintaining some of these things, that'd be really helpful. We're not a timeout room. So if somebody is acting kind of belligerent and ridiculous, please don't send them to the AFK room as punishment, as like, you need to go to your corner kind of thing. Because if that person is belligerent and they're unhappy and they're kind of being forced into the room and it's involuntary, then it's really just gonna create a disruption for everyone else who's there. And it's really gonna kind of break up the vibe that we're going for, the kind of relaxed atmosphere. So again, if someone is being belligerent, then that's when you kind of follow your own protocols for managing that person. We're also not a daycare. Once in a while, we get parents who have their kids and they're like, oh, these people seem responsible. There are adults in this room. I'll just leave my child here for like hours while I go and do con stuff. That's not cool. So we have a rule that like if there are any kids who look like they're 12 or under and they don't have their parents with them, we try to track down their parents and try to figure out who they're supposed to be there with. Ideally, we catch parents before they actually like walk out of the room without their child. But yeah, if you guys could help us out with that, that'd be great. We're also not a psychiatrist's office. We don't provide counseling. We're not there to provide psychotherapy. We are there to answer questions and provide resources and things like that. But we can't actually sit down and have like counseling sessions with people and go into people's childhoods and things like that to any significant extent. So that's not really the place where that's going to happen. But we are happy to point people in the right direction to get that kind of help. We're also not a drunk tank. This is something that happens every year. It seems as that we'll have people who are really, really hammered and need to go somewhere safe and quiet. And unfortunately, the AFK room is not the place for that. We've also had people who are really hungover who have been like vomiting in the corner. Please don't send those people to us. Please send them to medical. Do you have a question?
That was the question. Is like, do we have a drunk tank?
We call it hotel jail. We do. Well, a drunk guy called it hotel jail once, so now we call it hotel jail. It's medical. Where's Kara? Is she here? Kara over there. Wave your hand again. All right. She's our head of public safety, public health and safety. What were we calling it this year? The Band-Aids and Brew Boo Brigade. Okay. So basically, these guys, they're roaming around the event. If you encounter something like that, you can track one of them down. They'll usually have like a blue med bag, or call security. Security's right next to our actual EMS. We hire Prince George's County EMS. They sit in a room until they get a call.
There is also a Slack channel. You can ping security questions, and you guys have a Slack channel, right, too?
You can ping them as well. But we are renting some wheelchairs this year so they can, if safe enough, go back to their hotel room. If they are completely obliterated, they go to the hospital.
What's your Slack channel called?
Oh, I don't know. I know I have something.
Back of the badge.
Yeah.
So we can use that, and you can text it or call it.
Okay.
It's an option. There's many options.
So if you have somebody who is incapacitated, go through security to try to get them in touch with the Boo Boo Brigade, who will take over from there. Excellent. Thank you. Yes, please don't. It gets messy real quick. So enough about the attendees. Let's talk about you guys, because you guys have to be on that whole weekend, and it can get really intense. So how do you take care of yourselves and kind of ration your energy in such a way that you're not going to get completely burnt out? This one's obvious, and I don't mean to insult anyone's intelligence by bringing it up, but it really is like the most important. Try to get some sleep. It's really important. That's a lot of psychiatrists are actually like prescribing sleep now because there's so many issues that come about from not getting enough sleep. So strive for like, it's ambitious, but maybe like 6 hours of sleep a night if you can. I know. Okay, five, whatever you can get. But you have to be on during the day, and it's really hard to be on if you're completely sleep deprived. And it gets sort of worse, like your sleep deprivation kind of accumulates as you go throughout the weekend. So you have to kind of like keep that in mind. Another sort of obvious one: eat good food. Don't eat puppies, please. We have kind of two rules that we tell people. Try to eat at least one meal that requires a fork and a knife, because like a bag of Doritos and a cup of coffee are probably not going to cut it for the day. And try to eat at least one meal that like people who love you, like your family and your friends, wouldn't yell at you for eating. That's like relatively healthy. I think you burn something like 5,000 calories at MagFest. That's a stat I heard somewhere. Because you're walking around all day, it's high energy, you're engaging with people, it's very like physical. So you actually do expend a lot of energy. So make sure you replenish yourselves. Be aware of your own thoughts and your own feelings. So I have my little stress rainbow here. And on the green side, you can see that's like when you're calm and relaxed. That's when you're totally just chilling, no issues, no stress. You get kind of into the yellow area, and that's like productive anxiety. That's like kind of good anxiety. That's when it's like, oh, I have like my responsibilities and my job that I have to make sure I kind of stay on top of, or like I have homework to do and I got to make sure I get that done tonight. It's to the point like before you get overwhelmed. If it gets a little overwhelming, then you get into the red zone. Then you start getting into like distress level. And that's where you're like overwhelmed. That's where you're starting to panic. That's where it's getting really uncomfortable until you get to system shutdown mode. And I'm sure we've all been there before where it's like, I quit. I like rage quit, F this, throw the table, and walk away. And you just can't handle it anymore. So it's kind of important to gauge yourself throughout the weekend, like, use my little stress rainbow and think about, like, where am I? Am I in the, like, yellow area? Am I getting closer to the red? Like, where am I at? And if you find yourself kind of getting more in the red, that's when self-care is really important. That's when it's time to take a step back and be like, okay, I need to take a break. I need to eat something healthy. I need to get some sleep. I need to basically just take care of myself so I can get my meter back down into the like productive zone, right? And look out for each other. I've gotten to talk to a few of you guys this morning. It seems like such a really supportive, great group of people. And I think just having an understanding among yourselves that there's psychological safety in this group, that you guys are a team and that you can support each other and lean on each other, and maybe notice if somebody seems off, or seems like maybe they're not having a good time or they're really stressed out, and just asking them, hey, are you doing okay? Do you need support? Be honest with yourself and let people take care of you if you need it. Con crash. I think anyone who has done this before is very familiar with con crash, right? There's no like actual psychology term for this, we kind of the best our clinical director could find was post-adrenaline blues. That's where like you're like on all weekend, and then you go back to the real world, and it's like, first of all, you're physically probably pretty exhausted from not getting enough sleep, and you're also probably emotionally pretty drained as well. And it's really normal to feel kind of sad, or to feel kind of a sense of loss, like, man, I just had fun with like my best friends, and now I have to go back to my 9 to 5, and that sucks, and that's just a bummer. And and just to kind of feel just a little bit of sadness. And I think if you anticipate that, then it makes it a little easier to cope with. It's like, okay, I kind of expected that this was going to come on, and that's again where self-care is really important. Try to catch up on sleep that you didn't get, try to eat something healthy, try to get a little exercise, maybe go for a walk, things like that. Just until you kind of like level out. And when you do that, it's also, in addition to recovering mentally, you're also probably going to help yourself recover physically, which means you won't be as prone to like getting sick after conventions. I know that's a common phenomenon too, just getting it. Has everyone had that experience? Like we call it with PAX conventions, PAX Pox. I don't know if there's Mag flu. Okay, awesome. Yeah. Okay, right on. Yeah. So if you take that time in the week after and just kind of like take care of yourself, hopefully you can ward that off a little bit more. So just some information about the AFK room. I don't think we have an official location yet. I'm not sure. Do we have one? Oh.
Camilla 3 and 4 at the very beginning of that hallway that y'all were in.
Okay, Camilla 3 and 4 at the beginning of that hallway. Where Soapbox was last year. Okay. Cool. Yeah, and as I understand it, we were kind of tucked off to the side last year. This is a little bit more of a central location, so it should be a little easier to find, which is great. Our hours of operation, we're going to be open from Thursday to Saturday from 12 to 8, so we'll be open for 8 hours on those days. And then Sunday, we're going to have a shorter schedule. We're only going to be there from 12 to 3. So, and it's open to all of the attendees, but it's also open to you guys. And please take advantage of us. If you need a break and you want to stop in and you just need to replenish a little bit, come on by. We're all, yeah. Uh-huh. Right. And that was a concern that we heard was, that because we have limited hours, and we would love to extend our hours. It's really kind of a staffing issue, is that we get spread really thin and it's hard to find clinicians to be able to work all of those shifts. But if there is a mental health crisis in those off hours, especially if someone seems like they are at risk for hurting themselves or hurting someone else, that's really when you want to get the medical team involved. That's when you want to get maybe security involved. And that's where you can kind of come in as a supportive person, as far as like talking to that person and using your extra virgin olive oil techniques and empathizing and validating. If it's something that's really serious, then that's when you get medical and that's when you get security. But if it's somebody who's just maybe having a panic attack, then you don't have to be an expert to be able to be helpful to that person. You might not be able to fix it. And again, the expectation is not that you guys are psychologists and that you're going to be able to talk someone down that much. But you can still be helpful, and you can still, just have a kind face to that person in a moment where that's probably something that they really need. Does that answer your question? Okay. All right. So I'll take some questions. If you guys have any questions for us, our email address is info@takethis.org. Feel free to reach out. Our website is takethis.org. We have a lot of great resources on there. We have a lot of articles that are written by clinicians that center around like gaming and mental health issues specifically. So I think it's really interesting because it's very like specific for this population. And then we're really active on Twitter, so feel free to follow us on Twitter. Similarly, if anybody has any friends who happen to be therapists or therapists in training, we're always looking for clinicians to help staff the room. So if you guys can spread the word, and there's information on our website about how to sign up for that. So we take associate level clinicians, like clinicians who are maybe still in school, but for our fully licensed clinicians, we ask that they have like a full license, like an LCSW or like I'm an LPC. Psychologists, we do get psychiatrists once in a while who help us out, PsyDs. Yeah, but we're pretty broad as far as like the help that, you know, we'll anyone who's like willing to help and has some mental health training, we would love to have them. We also have some resources. So we have a bunch of resources listed on our website for mental health resources, like how to find help. We have a really great little infographic about how to find a therapist. It's like a little flow chart about how to find a therapist, because that can be a complicated process sometimes. We have a crisis text line. We actually partnered with them where you can text AFK to 741-741, and it's like the equivalent of the suicide hotline, only it's a text line, which might be a little safer for some people. That might be a more comfortable option than to actually call the helpline. And then, of course, we have the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. So, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now, are those transferred on the off hours?
Yes. Oh, yes. Those are like national resources, and they're manned 24/7. Yeah. Okay. So I'll kind of just open it up for any questions that you guys have.
If you're going to ask a question, try to use the microphone at the center.
This will just be real quick. Can we get the slide deck?
That's a good question. I think I would have to ask just to make sure if that's like cool. What is it on there that what information would you want?
The tools really encapsulated in something I can take away.
So we can definitely put something together for you guys that might like a handout or something like that would maybe have some information, just to have it kind of like all in one place, having the resources and maybe having like a guide on what to do in those situations. Little reminders. Yeah, of course. Thanks for taking an interest. Yeah.
Hey, so I actually have two questions. One was actually, you were talking about Con Crash. So I started out mostly working artist alleys, and what I noticed was after I'd done that, I would have these like period right afterward where like social niceties were harder to pull off. Is that like a general trend? Like if you like, I've noticed also people who work retail kind of have this problem. Like after a certain point, you're like, I will be nice to people, but don't ask me to do anything. Just don't. Like you get really snippy about that. So I'm wondering if there's been any studies kind of on like people working conventions having that kind of problem afterward for like a day or two.
I don't know of any specific research in terms of conventions, but I mean, I think it comes down to like energy depletion, right? So like when our resources are depleted, things like it takes energy to engage with other people and to engage in social activity. And when you just don't have energy and people come up to you and want to talk to you and want to ask you things, it's natural to feel kind of irritated with that. It's natural to get a little irritable or maybe a little just exhausted, to want to like remove yourself for a little while. And I think it's especially important after conventions to kind of listen to yourself with that and be honest with yourself about it. And if you're like, man, people are just, I can't deal with people right now.
I'm going to eat everyone's faces. They're all mine. Okay.
Yeah. Then to listen to that and to the best extent that you can, to try to take some time to yourself, you know, and listen to some music somewhere, you know, play a game by yourself for a little bit and just kind of give yourself a chance to like replenish, you know, and rebuild those resources a little bit.
Okay.
Does that answer that question?
Yeah, that actually hits it pretty much on the nose. Okay. The second question I had actually was, so I do have an anxiety disorder, and I found sometimes using like a fidget cube or like putty can really help. If I see somebody in distress, is it a good idea to offer something like that, to like, especially if I notice them like trying to grab at themselves or like fidgeting with their hands? Like, I'm just mostly checking in because, like, sometimes I've heard it's a good idea. Sometimes it seems to, like, get people psyched up more. So it's like, if I have one of my stim tools on me, would it be like, hey, do you want some putty? It changes color. Seriously, like, the thinking putty is amazing for that because it tells you how long, like, it found with me, like, I'll squeeze it until it changes color, which is usually about 5 minutes. And then by that point, I'm like, oh, I feel a little better now.
Oh, that's really cool. I love that.
Yeah, so cool stuff.
Yeah, I work with kids now. That makes me want to, like, get that for the kids I work with.
Dude, thinking putty's awesome. You can get the glass ones, and they actually glow in the dark. It's pretty cool.
That's rad. I mean, my thought is, yeah, and a lot of the time, and that's self-soothing stuff, right? And that's another way that you can kind of identify when someone is in distress is that they might be kind of fidgeting, they might be playing with their hair. Sometimes it can be a little bit even more harmful. They'll be scratching themselves or picking and things like that. And that's a indicator that maybe somebody is experiencing something. My thought is, I mean, it kind of wraps into the other tools that we were talking about in terms of like empathizing and validating and offering options to people. I mean, I think if someone is kind of upset and you're trying to kind of just talk to them about like, hey, how's it going? Are you doing all right? And you see that they're like, that they are fidgeting. I think, if you happen to have a stim tool on you, it's part of like being a nice human, right? Is like, hey, I have this thing. I'm wondering if this might help you kind of de-escalate. But I think it's also a very like, person to person thing. What works for one person might not necessarily work for the other person. And so I think the default sort of response should be that like, empathizing and validating and offering options. But hey, if you have a stim tool on you,
might as well offer kind of thing.
Yeah, if you think it would maybe be helpful to that person.
Sweet. Okay. Yeah.
Why
I'm
not?
pretty much good. Gonna go back to my
That putty sounds awesome. I'm totally gonna look that up. Alright. A list of cons you're gonna be at. I can tell you off the top of my head, we're at every PAX, except PAX Australia. Unfortunately, I would love to go to that one. And we're at MomoCon. I think we're at E3. We were at TwitchCon this year. So I haven't actually seen like a definitive list of everything, but we go to a lot. I'll see what I can scrounge up for that. Yeah. Here in the back.
Do you post on the door the times that you open, close, and like resources available? Because most of I saw a lot of panic attacks, mostly when people get drunk, and it's definitely after 8. So between like 10 and 4 a.m., it is basically a shit show.
Yeah.
For my department, the division, whatever.
So you're asking like if we post something on the door in our after hours about like when we are going to be opening back up and maybe some resources in those situations. Right now, I mean, we do have a big sign outside of our door that has our hours posted. We list our website on it. I don't think we necessarily list any other resources at this point. I don't think that's a bad idea though to have something there. Mm-hmm.
For staff, but all of these people, like, it would be nice to have a quieter place to go. And if it's closed, then I don't know where they go. They basically find a hallway and just cry in a corner. Right?
Yeah. I think that's a really good idea is to maybe just have, like these resources just posted somewhere. And I think also as staff, if you notice somebody who's off crying in a corner, responding to that person and doing what you can within your power to try to provide resources to them and help them and just sit with them.
And if you want to request more like public safety signs or something to do that sounds like a good idea too.
Yeah, so I just want to, seeing if going to talk to these people, that can take like 2 to 3 hours of one person's time. It is not easy when you have somebody sobbing on you because somebody hit them or they're going through a divorce, whatever, it all comes out at night.
Right.
That's almost impossible.
That's usually why the first thing that I ask people is like, who are you here with? Because if we can locate, okay, you were with your friends, you're having a panic attack right now, you don't know where your friends are, okay, let's try to help you find them. And then kind of explaining the situation to those friends and or to their parents, whoever they're here with, and saying, okay, they're having a really hard time right now. They might just need someone to sit with them for a little bit. And I think kind of distributing the responsibility onto them a little bit, because you're right, we don't have the resources to be able to sit with people for 2 hours and try to. Uh-huh. Right. And I mean, like, if it is really serious enough, then it probably should get escalated to where there is like a crisis intervention. If someone is certainly if someone is talking about hurting themselves or hurting someone else, then that's when it would be escalated to like a medical team or crisis team, and that's kind of following whatever protocols you guys have outlined in your handbooks. I don't know if that answered your question.
So you mean like call the cops?
What is outlined in your handbook as far as responding to a crisis situation or a situation where someone maybe is acting threatening or acting like they might want to hurt themselves?
I always recommend people
Mike.
call security.
Mike.
Oh, sorry. I always recommend staffers in that kind of situation to call security, but in the handbook I have outlined there is a 24-hour urgent care center that's like right down the road. That could be a good thing. I know that security will transport, and this could be totally wrong, but I know at other events they sometimes do in extreme cases transport inebriated people. Is that right? Or oh, okay. They'll have EMS transport in like severe cases, bringing people up to their rooms to like. We will do, sorry to repeat, this is just for the stream. We'll do door-to-door service if they're in the Gaylord.
So it really, it's about kind of following those protocols and responding to those serious situations. And my thought is, like, if you are debating whether or not this is a serious enough situation to get, to escalate it and to get other people involved, if you're even debating it, then you probably want to err on the side of doing that and getting them help, because you never know. Any other questions? Yeah.
I'm going to lean down. I just wanted to kind of expand on the use your authority concept. It's really important to remember that we as staff know the convention center, to an extent know the schedule, hopefully, and attendees, especially first-year attendees, do not have all that information and can easily be overwhelmed by that. And what I really mean is like I work in a hospital, and it's a big hospital, and it's a confusing hospital, and at least once a day I play Sherpa or a guide for somebody to tell them, how to get from point A to point B. And sometimes I just have to take 10 minutes out of my day to physically walk them somewhere. And if you find someone having a panic attack or even just slightly overwhelmed, knowing, where's a quiet space right now that I can help take them to, knowing where can they get food or water easily or whatnot. Like those, just remembering that stuff might be obvious to us and pointing, oh yeah, go down the hall that way. Like, sometimes it's worth it to just take those 5 minutes to just physically walk them and be compassionate on that. And that's, I don't know, that's basically that.
Yeah. And a lot of people really welcome that help, just that one-on-one attention, and that someone cares, Sometimes just feeling like somebody cares and is taking their time to kind of like help you out, that can help really de-escalate a situation.
It occurs to me that I think we've had questions about prayer spaces at MagFest. Is the AFK room an appropriate space for that?
A prayer space?
Yeah, if somebody wanted a quiet space for that. I don't know. Or, I don't know if there's something else that we do.
I mean, my thought is, if it were sort of an organized thing where like a group of people were praying, then that could be like a little disruptive or a little distracting. And really, we try to keep the AFK room as like stimulation free as possible.
Yeah, I meant more like silent, quiet sort of thing. Like if they need a quiet space.
Yeah, if you need a moment and you want to kind of sit for a little bit and pray to, as yourself, and that's something that is helpful to you, and it's a really great coping strategy for a lot of people. And the AFK room is a good place to do that. It's quiet.
Thank you.
Yeah, as long as you're not disrupting anyone or you're just you're chilling out, go for it. Whatever helps you kind of get yourself zen again. Yep.
I actually did use the AFK room to meditate last year and several times, so I'm glad to hear that it's allowed.
Awesome. Yeah. Oh, totally. And thanks for sharing that, because that's a great way to kind of regain your calm in those moments. Yeah. Hey.
Hello. I just have a really quick comment for my fellow staffers. Whether you take 5 minutes or 5 hours to help a crisis situation out, please make sure you take that equivalent time for yourself afterwards. The high of being at the convention can make the endorphins make you feel like you're fine, that didn't affect you, and then it's just gonna fester and you'll crash later. So make sure you self-care after you care for somebody else.
That's a great point. Thank you. Yeah, it takes a lot, and we might not realize how much it takes out of us emotionally to help somebody who's in distress, because when we see somebody who's in distress, there's a part of us that kind of feels that too, like when we see someone and we're concerned about them, that also brings out a lot in us. And it, again, coming back to like energy and having your own emotional resources kind of deplete, that can take a lot. It's important to be nice to yourselves. Any other questions?
Not really a question, but if you could repeat this on the microphone for the thing. Eat some fruit.
Eat some fruit.
Literally, it helps significantly.
Awesome. That's a great.
Along with the using a fork and knife thing.
Yeah.
For those short snacks, literally eating a piece of fruit will help rather than Doritos.
And if you're feeling really crazy, maybe eat some vegetables. I know. All right. Okay, we might not be ready for that. Okay. All right. Doritos are a vegetable, right? Like, there's corn. Like. All right. Any other questions, comments? All right, guys. Thank you so much. I'm going to be kind of hanging around, so if anyone has any questions, you can come and find me. So, all right. Cool.
All right, so we're actually on break until 1:30, so go enjoy yourselves.